I hope you're having a good day today. We are continuing to look at Noah today. We're going to be looking at him as he entered the ark. We'll read the passage here in a moment. The hymn that we are going to consider today is the hymn, He Leadeth Me.
He leadeth me, O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort fraught. Whate'er I do, where I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, by his own hand he leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by his hand he leadeth me.
I'd like to look at the next verse also of the hymn. I don't have recording for this, but let's look at this one together. The second verse begins, sometimes mid scenes of deepest gloom, sometimes where Eden's bowers bloom. By waters still or troubled sea, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. Oh, blessed thought. As I said, the passage we're going to be looking at is Genesis 7, verse 1. Then the Lord said to Noah, come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. I was just thinking about Noah entering the ark, following the Lord's directions and building the ark, and now following the Lord's directions to enter the ark as the Lord led him. And I was thinking about what or whom Noah had lost. I want you to look back up a little bit into chapter 5, and you see a little bit of the timeline. We mentioned something in our discussion of Enoch. I want to back up chapter 5, the tail end of the chapter, the genealogy. Enoch, where we read a few days ago, was mentioned in verse, let's see, looks like around verse 19. Verse 24 is where Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. And of course, Enoch's son was Methuselah, and we spoke about the prophecy. It's Jude that talks about Enoch prophesied. And we mentioned something about Methuselah. But let's read verse 30. Because Methuselah is actually Noah's grandfather. So Methuselah had a child named Lamech. Verse 28, where it speaks about him, or pardon me, I guess verse 25 is where it talks about him. He begot Lamech. And so Lamech is Noah's father. And then we have Noah. I want you to look at the times a little bit, because we know from chapter 7, I believe, where it speaks about it, that Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth. He was 600 years old. So what that means, to look back at our passage, after Noah's father was Lamech. After he begot Noah, Lamech lived 595 years and had sons and daughters. What that means is that in the 100 years or so that Noah was building the ark, that right before, just in the last few years, as the building was concluding, Noah lost his dad. That's what that means. That Noah lost his father. When we lose loved ones, sometimes we get in a bad way. And we get caught up and we sorrow like the world sorrows, as though we have no hope. And we our lamentation just defines us for the rest of our lives. And all of a sudden we stop doing what the Lord wants us to do. And what basically is happening at that point is we have stopped saying, He leadeth me. We are being led by our grief at that point. We cannot let that happen. We have to let the Lord lead us. And we have to follow the Lord. And when the Lord said it's time to get in the ark, it was time to get into the ark. There was the building, when Lamech died, there was the building that needed to be finished. The work went on. Doesn't mean that Noah didn't grieve for a time. I'm sure he did. But there was work to do. And so I wanted you to think about that idea that he lost his father just a few years before the flood came. You might remember from that study or that brief look at Enoch, Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, died the year of the flood. So we might think about that as well. He died the year of the flood. Do the math. And that's, as I said, looks like that was part of the prophecy. But still, he lost his grandfather. The same year that the Lord said, go into the ark, he had lost his grandfather. Just a few years before that, his father. But did you also notice in the passage, it says, after he begot Noah, Lamech lived 595 years and had sons and daughters. Do we read about them being on the ark? We don't read about them being on the ark. So what does that say about them? Well, I would suggest, based on our reading today, when the Lord says, come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation, what does that say about his aunts and his uncles and their family and their families? Noah lost much of his family. There's only a few, that is 8 souls that were saved on that ark. He had aunts and uncles. And in all likelihood, perhaps, not necessarily, but I think in all likelihood, their families, so his cousins would have been alive. But when the Lord destroyed the world with water, he was destroying them too. That can be hard to deal with. And sometimes when that happens, when our loved ones, when our family and friends, when they don't follow the Lord like they should, it's hard to leave them behind. And that's where we have to say, He leadeth me. Because if the Lord is not leading us, if we allow those friends and family, if we allow them to lead us astray, the Lord is not leading us anymore. It's just lip service at that point. Noah, when the Lord said, it's time to go, he was leaving family behind. He was. What he was ultimately doing was he was leaving the world behind. He had a home. He had lived 600 years. He had lived 600 years. He had lived, it was a wicked world, but whatever he had, it's left behind. Just mindful of, in the New Testament, as it talks about the world being crucified to us. I believe Paul speaks about that. And that as we are called to come out from among them and be separate, Noah, the faithful all along have been called out. That's why they're a part of the kingdom. All those who say they are pilgrims and sojourners, they've all come out. And so when the Lord told Noah, come into the ark, we think about what Noah was putting behind him. Lost loved ones, we hope they were faithful. Lost loved ones that it looks like they were not faithful, and the world in general. We have to say, He leadeth me. Whatever happens, as the hymn put it, whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. Sometimes mid scenes of deepest gloom, sometimes where Eden's bowers bloom. Whether it's waters still or troubled sea, it's still God's hand that leadeth me. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.